Welcome intro. Välkomna allihopa. Welcome here tonight. We have had the pleasure of having you here in residence, Reza Mirabi, for 12 days, is it? And I have understood that you have been meeting quite a lot of people, for example Stella, and now we're super happy to just hear a bit more about what you're thinking of and researching on. So welcome so much. Thank you.
It's very wonderful that you're here. As you now know, my name is Reza Mirabi. I'm a choreographer, but I'm also somewhere between a storyteller, a visual artist, and a seed keeper. I felt for a while I was not really saying that I'm all these other things as well. I was always saying I'm a choreographer. But actually I realized that these other parts, the storytelling and the seed keeping particularly, are very important for me. I'm based in Amsterdam, and I was invited here for those 12 days. Today is actually day 10, and here we are. And I'm using this moment just to open up the studio, to allow you into my process and into my research, which is called Seed Keeping in Times of Crisis. And before really going into the research and what it is about and how it started, I'm going to start with a little storytelling piece. I want to share my research in the form, I'm taking the form of 9 different seeds. And each of these 9 seeds is in their own way escaping the botanical realm. Each seed is trying to extend the notion and trying to redefine what a seed is and what a seed can be today. Each of these 9 seeds can be planted. Each of these 9 seeds can grow in the right conditions. Each of these 9 seeds can transform its environment. Each of these 9 seeds is resilient to extreme conditions. Each of these 9 seeds is alive. So the first of these 9 seeds was the storytelling piece you just heard. And the second seed is a graffiti. It's this graffiti. The graffiti writes, "Azadi, kaashtanie, tokhmesho, darim." It's the graffiti that is kind of the seed that started this research. I mean, I've been working with seeds for 15 years, but this graffiti changed the way I was looking at seeds and trying to understanding seeds and what they can be. This graffiti I saw 1 year ago in October, exactly 1 year ago, October 2022. It was graffitied onto a house wall in Meydoon-e Shush, which is a neighborhood in the south of Tehran. It's around the corner from my grandmother's house. And it was written just days after the killing of Jina, Amini, of the Kurdish woman, and just before the beginning of the current and ongoing protests that were started by women in Iran and that spread all over and far beyond the country. So the sentence reads, "Azadi, kaashtanie, tokhmesho, darim." Freedom needs to be planted, and we have the seeds. So this graffiti for me felt like such a unfiltered depiction of this underlying pulse that was living inside of the people, inside the hearts of the people. This graffiti does not exist anymore. Like so many graffitis that are used politically in Iran, they get removed very fast. So this graffiti lived for maybe a day before it was quickly removed. But this graffiti left me with a few questions. What are the seeds the graffiti speaks to? What are the seeds that can plant freedom? And what seeds do we need for radically feminist revolution and a complete paradigm shift? The third seed is this moment in which we are sitting. It's right now here, we're sitting together on the 28th of October at MDT 2023, and we find ourselves in the midst of the 6th mass extinction, based on hyper-extractive monoculture and the rotten imaginaries of the digitized colonial fascist industrial complex. Imaginaries fueled by invasive tools that attack our abilities for attention, stripping us of our facilities to think, to sit and concentrate, making us seem intellectually lazy, emotionally lazy, careless, impotent. Almost embarrassing it seems we have become. Yet this laziness, this carelessness, this impotence is orchestrated. We have become disembodied, imperceptible to the simplifications of our worlds and lives, making us blind to all the narratives that are not highlighted, all the narratives that are not streamed through screens. But we cannot afford any simplification of our complexities. We need to find each other somehow in the darkness of this time. A darkness in the constant light of LEDs and screens, and in the mirages of social connections, we somehow need to reach out. We somehow need to try and try and try to remember the underlying feeling of our inseparability and find accomplices in our approach to sit with and to move through today's mess. And this moving through really does not need further complexity, but it needs strength and resilience for simple gestures and acts. As we find ourselves in the midst of the sixth mass extinction, where 93% of the world's seeds have already been lost, and so their potential, and we find ourselves lost. We find ourselves in the midst of wars and genocides, Gaza, Ethiopia, Ukraine, Kurdistan, Yemen, Libya. 93% of all seeds have already been lost, and so we find ourselves lost without potential, possibilities, in heartbreaking times of simultaneous crises, 2022 being the year with the most international wars and people killed through them since 1945. Famine, which almost seemed to disappear a decade ago, is back and rising, with more and more people dying from hunger and malnutrition. Infectious viral diseases are back and spreading. We find ourselves living in and through the sixth mass extinction, not due to asteroids or volcanoes, but due to human action. 93 of all seeds have already been lost, and so we find ourselves lost and broken through years of heartbreaking challenges. My own family's tensions and struggles as Kurds in Iran over the last year during the Xinjiang Azadi revolution, the displacements of friends, families in Gaza, the burning out left and right of close friends around me, and then the suicide of not just one, but two of my close friends in recent years. My mental health has been critical over these stretches, confronting multiple traumas simultaneously. Anxieties, paranoia, depression, psychosis. The world is resonating with my mind, and my mind is resonating with the world as part of the inescapable mental health epidemics and the unsustainable nature of our minds. Was it not for friendships, for my relationships, for practices, for dancing, for singing to give me ground? And was it not for seeds? Seeds that I could plant in it. Seeds that I keep close to me. Seed keeping became a practice of urgency. Seeds have accompanied me as a mode of thinking and writing, portals and possibilities for new worlds. Carrying seeds in my pockets and feeling them between my fingers whenever I reach for something, being reminded of their warmth and life. Seeds have kept me going when I was not able to move anymore. Different seeds need different conditions to sprout. What are the seeds that can sprout in our current conditions of crisis? Or what conditions do we need to cultivate for these seeds of resistance to sprout and grow roots everywhere? Not just in the midst of violent oppression, but also here. As the seed bank in Syria has been burned down in a horrible war a few years ago, And as the seed bank in Norway has recently been flooded due to the unexpected melting of permafrost, it has become obvious how we need new strategies for keeping our seeds and cannot rely on centralized systems organized by governmental bodies. Every time we leave the house, let us stick the seeds of resistance under our muddy shoes and disperse them wherever we go. So, the fourth seed so I was 18 when I started with researching about seeds or getting in touch with seeds, and I started by farming and doing organic gardening and land regeneration, all these works, and of course seeds are part of it. I was never really interested in seeds, but then working with seeds, something really happened to me, and I saw the people that were seed keepers. They were so attractive to me, like they were such special people. I felt such a sense of belonging that I got really into seed keeping and the practices, and so I told my family about it, and my grandfather was saying, of course you like seeds, because we like seeds. I said, what do you mean? It's like we were keeping seeds in our family. So I knew that my family, they were farmers in Kurdistan 2 generations ago, but I didn't really think that of course they must have kept their own seeds. And so he was telling me a lot about the seeds they were keeping. He was quite young because our family left Kurdistan and they moved to other cities and then to Tehran. And yeah, so in 2009, my grandfather was already living in Tehran, and there was a huge protest movement in 2009 called Mojasabs, the Green Wave, and it was very similar to last year, which was not so internationally known, but it was very big with millions of people on the street, and really giving hope for a different tomorrow in Iran. But it was then violently repressed. And in that summer 2009, during this protest movements, my grandfather, who was still somewhat involved in this, actually died silently at home, not in the protests. But he died in this movement. And every time I think of him, I think of seeds. Somehow this has really become this connection. And also I think of something he always did. Every time we met, he would put his face very close to my face. He would smile with a big smile, and he would sing a song to me. Mm-hmm. And it was always the same song. Mm-hmm. And it's called Age Yerus. It's a song by a singer called Faramas Aslani. It's from 1977. So it's 1 year before the Islamic Revolution. And if Age Yerus means if one day you forget me, I will become the bird of the sea. I will be left in the clutches of the waves, and I will tell my heart to be quiet, but I will tell the wind to sing for you until the morning. So the fourth seed is this song. اگه یه روز بری سفر بریز پیشم بی خبر از زیر راه یا همیشم دوباره باز تنها میشم به شب میگم پیشم بمونه به باد میگم تصاب بخونه از تیاری یاری چرا میری تن نمیذاری اگه فراموشم کنی ترک آغوشم کنی پرنده ای دریا میشم تو جنگ ما چرا همیشم به دل میگم خاموش بمونه بذاره در تو دوش رونه میرم که هر کسی بدونه که دشمن و تنها نذاری اگه یه روزی نوم تو گوش من صدا کنه دوباره باز همه بیاد که منو مبتلا کنه به دل میگم کاریش نباشه بذاره درد تو دواشه بره توی تموم جونم که باز برات عوض بخونم اگه یه روزی نوم تو گوش من صدا کنه دوباره باز غمت بیاد که منو مبتلا کنه به دل میگم کاریش نباشه بذاره درد تو دواشه بره توی تموم جونم که باز برات عوض بخونم So, whenever I think of seeds, and I have seeds in my hands, or I see them, I have to think of birds. I mean, I guess in a way this connection is very obvious, but it seems super critical for me, and I'm always trying, like, when I think of seeds, I always want to tell stories about birds. And somehow I just don't want to ignore this connection. So the fifth seed are birds. And there's one little story or like a research that someone told me about a few years ago, and it's that about our hearing. And I mean, humans have quite a long spectrum of hearing. But in this huge range, there's some little ranges that we're very attuned to. And the main range is 85 hertz to 155 hertz. That's like the hearing that we are very, very perfectionated, you know, we're very exact. And this is the range that they found out is the human voice, which seems obvious. So our hearing is very attuned to language and to deciphering all these nuances of language, the intonations, the inflections. And so it was obvious that there's this range, and then much later they found out that there's another range that is very disconnected from this. It's much higher, that human beings are attuned to as well and are very exact about, and it's around 5,000 hertz. So it's really off, different range. And so they've been doing quite a bit of research on what is this range in nature, what can they find, and they found it correlates to birdsong. So human beings have this listening and hearing attuned to birds. Birds have kind of always been very important in our history, that where there are birds, we kind of follow them, because birds always speak of a healthy environment for humans. So we've been kind of following birds. But there are two examples that I've been thinking of how this relationship between humans and birds, or humans following birds, has changed. The first is that in the last 3 decades we have lost 3 million birds, which is a total of 1/3 of birds have been extinct. There are a lot of areas in which humans live now, there are no more birds. The second is an article that was written by a good friend of mine. She's a journalist, and she was in Gaza earlier this year, and she met some beautiful bird watchers there, and I want to share this article with you. April 7, 2023, Gaza City. The skies of Gaza fill with shifting shapes on an early spring morning. At first, they are barely visible, only specks soaring above central Gaza's wetlands. Mendi Sirda quickly raises her binoculars. Storks, she shouts excitedly. Close by, Lara Sirda, her identical twin sister wearing matching clothes, grabs her long focus camera and points it to the sky. So many, so beautiful. She cries out with joy as she snaps photos of hundreds of white storks flying in circles above her. Every spring, millions of birds set out from their wintering grounds in Africa and make their way north to Europe and Asia. At the intersection of 3 continents, the Middle East is an important stopover and one of the world's busiest corridors for bird migration. Many of these migrating birds fly over Gaza, an overcrowded coastal enclave often described as an open-air prison. The birds soar above more than 2 million people who are confined by an air, sea, and land blockade imposed by Israel since 2007. Our movement is very restricted, says Lara. We wish we were birds, so we could move freely. Over the past years, bird-watching trips to the strips, wetlands, groves, and fields have offered the twins a rare opportunity to escape the feeling of confinement. With their heads raised to the sky, they search for birds and move through the endless skies. The sisters share their photos on social media and are helping spread awareness about birds and conservation in one of the world's most beleaguered environments. People are surprised when they see our photos. When they think about Gaza, they think it's only blockade, poverty, destruction, but there's also beauty. Lara and Mandy, who are 47 and live in Gaza City, were never formally trained in wildlife photography or biology. Both work with Atfaluna, an organization supporting and working with deaf people in Gaza. Since they were children, they were interested in nature and wildlife. But they only started taking birdwatching seriously in 2015, when they photographed 2 birds they saw in their garden. They looked like sparrows we usually see in Gaza, but their color was brighter. We published a photo on Facebook, and the birdwatcher in the West Bank told us it was a Spanish sparrow, one of millions of migrating birds that fly over the region, recalls Mandy. We started reading more about birds and became very passionate about it. So we started photographing all the birds we saw, she continues. Since then, the twins have spotted 165 species of migrating and resident birds in Gaza. They talk excitedly about the day they managed to spot the European nightjar, a nocturnal species that is notoriously hard to find because the dappled plumage blends with their habitat. I saw the bird resting on an olive branch. It was very well hidden, but we managed to photograph it. It was one of the best days we can remember. Mandy smiles proudly. Children who grew up in Gaza witnessing military offensives are more likely to know how to distinguish the sounds of missiles than birdsong. But sometimes there are unexpected connections between birds and bombings. I used to live in an area that was under bombardment, and a couple of birds came to build their nests in holes made by shrapnel from Israeli F-16 missiles, says Salem Al-Qawada, an architect who focuses on the reconstruction of communities devastated by conflict and the possibilities of social transformation. Across the occupied Palestinian territories, birds build nests in shrapnel holes or checkpoints and perch on the concrete walls, barbed wire, and fences that segregate and confine Palestinians. Birds know no borders. They can go wherever they'd like, but we are doomed to be here, says Abdel Fattah Rabo, a professor of environmental studies at the University of Gaza. In Gaza here, we have people who go to pet shops and markets to buy birds just to free them from their cages, adds Rabo. Because as a people under occupation, we shouldn't put birds in cages. Seed 6. This January, the Danish company Ariza announced that it had produced an unusual new seed. It is a variant of tailcress, a small flowering weed which turns red in the presence of landmines. Ariza scientists had genetically modified the seed so that it reacts to nitrogen dioxide, a gas commonly emitted by explosives. The result is a new way to detect active landmines. The seeds are sprinkled over a suspected area. You wait a few weeks for the tailcress to grow, and whenever the wheat turns red instead of green, there will be a mine. It is assumed that there are currently more than 20 million active, undetected landmines strewn across 80 countries, killing or injuring around 20,000 people yearly. Jinjian Azadi, Zanzendigi Azadi, Woman, Life, Freedom. A seed made up of 3 words, planted more than 40 years ago in Kurdistan. The words sprouted already a few times, as in 2018 in Rojava in Syria, and again last year in Roshalat in Iran, after the killing of Jina Amini. But we urgently need to tend to them, care for them, spread these seeds, talk about them, share them, so that they can keep growing, their roots deep, slowly cracking, more and more breaking the concrete floors of fascist patriarchal oppressions. Seat 8 is from a little collaboration I did with two friends. Because before coming here, I was in Portugal for a few weeks. A good friend of mine, Khaled, he has a farm there. He's an organic farmer, and he's also a percussionist. So together with another friend of mine, with Rosie, we were talking a lot about rhythm, and we got into the idea of syncopation. And syncopation is, if you have a beat, the 1, 2, 3, 4, then everything that happens in between is the weak parts, and the beat is the strong part. And in syncopation, you try to remove the beat, or you just try to silence the beat. You try to shift and put the accent onto the weak elements. And so we've been thinking with this idea, which is also considered offbeat, something that is used in jazz music. And so we've been thinking with this idea of also of seed keeping kind of being a practice of syncopation. It's something that happens offbeat. It's that what doesn't really happen in a normal farm today. In commercial farming, not at all. Even in small-scale farming, they don't work with seeds. They usually buy the small plants. They don't grow the seeds itself. They buy the seedlings. Seeds are done somewhere else. And then they just take the vegetables. They don't care about harvesting the seeds. So seed keeping is something you don't make money with. It's something that happens outside of the commercial. It's somehow the syncopating is that which happens in the offbeat. So we've been filming and doing a little draft of a video, and that's the Seat 8.
So here's the underlying pulse. Instead of being like 1, 2, 3, 4, it's like then you start to syncopate.
last seed. It's just a short one. It's the 9th seed. So the 9th seed is a sentence. It's by Aurora Levin Morales. Say these words when you lie down and when you rise up, when you go out and when you return. In times of mourning, embroider them on your garments, tattoo them on your shoulders, teach them to your children, your neighbors, your enemies, recite them in your sleep, here, in the cruel shadow of empire. Another world is possible.